Our second half finds us at having just digested quickly 6 things called Sadakya, 6 ways of getting Brahma Gyan, knowledge of Brahman. Very rare in this world, not sought after by many people, and those who do seek after it probably rarely come to such a high tattva or principle as Sadakya. And we were talking at the break, 6 ways are not really 6 different paths really. You can see how they're just really one 6-fold path, sort of like the 8-limbed yoga of Patanjali. So it'd be very hard to separate, say, even these bottom 3, letters and alphabets and padas and mantras, powerful words and utterances from each other. But I was explaining at the break too that you could look at the opposite side of mantras and see how many fruitless, futile words are being uttered, or just superficial words, what to speak of words that are detrimental to others, viciousness, the opposite of ahimsa. There's a kind of violence people set upon each other through words. And they could be very deceitful words, like you don't even know what they're saying, but they're actually insulting you kind of words. And then there'll be the encouraging words of the seers and so forth that you're wondering, they really think I'm that worthy? So you have to look at both sides of it to really prefer the wheat over the chaff, which is the Kaivalya Upanishad again. And these 9 slokas that we've taken in the first 2 Sundays, I'm really fleshing those out. So what we want to do to flesh them out is to, as the very last words, speaking of words we had here was, mantra then is the special knowledge which, when contemplated, reveals the otherwise unseen truth, that the universe is full of Brahman. And we say the universe of sounds, words, thoughts, it's all coming out of Matrika, out of Mother Wisdom. And that Mother Wisdom is found in Brahman as the side that manifests, right? Kala takes beings from the manifested to the unmanifested, and then back to the manifested and back to the unmanifested in these rounds. But these rounds have a guide. So you're really not talking about samsara here, are you? You're talking about higher tattvas, 12 of them. This is what you're being initiated into when you take the samkhya and what you learn from it and meditated on it with what yoga told you to do with them, and then find out that there's these higher tattvas within you. We're calling them psychical and spiritual. And this is how Vedanta, yoga, samkhya, India philosophy guides you over time, and why we've been saying we really need to qualify ourselves with these ancient wisdom systems at their deepest level, not take any wooden nickels like calling yoga hatha and then thinking that physical things are going to benefit us spiritually at all when they're just not, as Shankara declares. Is one of the greatest knowers in India. So we have to go on this premise that we will see everything as Brahman if our words and thoughts graduate to a level of sensitivity and subtlety that they possess in their very nature. Like in Sanskrit again, kala, which could mean everything from time to Shiva to the highest principle of Sadakya. So in fact it reminds me that if this is the way that which we would see this unseen truth through the very words we're speaking, if we could have a mind that was conscious of words and their deepest meaning, we'd express it, say, like Jafar does in this beautiful song we sometimes sing. Jo kuch hai so tu hai, tujhse humne dil ko lagaya, arsh se lekar farsh jamin taka, Arjamin se Arshabari taka Jaha me deka Tu inazuraya Jaha me deka Tu inazuraya Joku chahai so Tu ihai Tujhse humne dil ko lagaya Soch samaja deka balatu Aisana koi dundanikala Abaya samaj mein Jafar kiaya Abaya samaj mein Jafar kiaya Jo kuch hai so tu ihai tujhse humne dil ko lagaya dil ko lagaya. I have finally understood, O Lord, that everything exists in Thee. Every heart is ultimately united in Thee. Nothing exists but Thee. From the life heavens, these here, right? From the life heavens, throughout the boundless universe, and even into the dark nether regions, these nether regions here, whatever our souls, wherever they journey, we find only Brahman, because nothing exists but Brahman. Matchless is your presence, O Lord. I have found nothing which compares to it in all of the worlds. Contemplating it, this humble singer Jafar has become illumined, and this simple truth has dawned upon his understanding, that nothing whatsoever exists but Thee. So this non-dual stotram, they call it a ghazal. There's some of them in existence, not many. And of course you need a certain kind of voice on in practice to be able to render it properly. But this is really kind of the sum total in song, in a wisdom song, about all of this. And that's what it all comes to in the end. So that's why we say the Vedanta and the Tantra are seeking the same way. And they do use Brahmagyana, both of them. But that Brahmagyana moves more swiftly in the case of a qualified Vedantic aspirant than it does in the case of a qualified Tantric aspirant, to achieve the same goal and end. So all is Brahman, and that's the 9th and 10th sloka of the Kaivalya Upanishad, which we're looking at today. So we can continue to course on studying those and make a little headway into it. And you can all now write to me for the t-shirt, I survived studying the 6 ways of Brahmagyana and Tantra, called Sadakya, with Babaji, Bob Kindler, for an hour. Because, there's a lot there. I mean, we didn't even really go through the powers here, Nivritti Kala, Pratishta Kala, these 5 forms of Kala. The 5s again are there. So this is actually a good retreat, a good teaching for a retreat that we could do at some point. We could definitely take 2 or 3 days to unwrap this deeper. But at least you've got this as a concept and know it as a darshana in India, because Tantra is not really, except this kind of fallen Tantra that's come to people. It has to do more with drugs and sex, intoxicants and procreation and those kinds of things, sensual enjoyment. There's a Tantra there that's buried very deep, that was in its heyday before that fall, was an equal candidate for the teachings, for India's highest teachings. Just so profound. and so much toward the word in this case. And Vedanta is also toward the word, and definitely yoga has those teachings about the word, but Tantra is there right in the midst of that. And so we can say that we have some general now understanding of a great mystical sort of secret system like that even mentions the secret of creation in it, Shrishti Rahasya. Because of that mention, I have a whole chart on Shrishti Rahasya, which would be, if we were on retreat right now, where I would take you, so that we could understand how the worlds appear in the mind and what they're made of, matrikas. And so this would be more, compelled. This would be more injected into us. Like my teacher said, you must get injections of Brahmagyan all the time. Because we've been talking about that lately, why this wisdom isn't sticking on wet roads, as Westerners' minds. And even the people who maybe study, the young people who are studying for a long time and hearing these teachings, need to hear it again and again and again and again until it just really replaces the old ways of thinking, which are basically family, job, money, and occupation, in rounds, with almost nothing else but an occasional vacation for the senses, or a family vacation or something. So we'd want to impress upon this wisdom until it changes their thinking process. May our thinking process be illumined. We chant that almost every day in the Sahaja, natural enlightenment, in the Sahana Bhavatu. So where to go with this next would then be that sloka I just mentioned. It's talking about Brahman, and it defines what Brahman is. So we just learned about words. So let's take the English language and look at the inscrutable epithets of Brahman for a minute. Also another chart we like to bring up at times. And if we're looking at it with this newfound discovery of words, as Shrishti Rahasya, then we're actually kind of going to prove to ourselves right now that if we take a great Upanishad, like the Kaivalya Upanishad, and juxtapose it next to the Taittiriya Upanishad, where all this teaching about prana is, that we're filling in another gap that perhaps both Lord Kapila and the seers of Tantra didn't fill in very often. It's very strange how prana doesn't make its presence known in the teachings, the darshanas of India very much. But you'll find it here and there. Taittiriya Upanishad, one of those places. So here's a quote from it. Out of fear of Brahman, the wind blows. The sun rises. Indra presides. Indra is the god of gods. Death bows low, and the cosmic sets of fives carry out their respective functions. The individual soul only becomes fearless when it attains firm and peaceful ground in that supreme reality. Even a wise man falls victim to fear if he fails to reflect on Brahman. Reminds me of a good teaching of Shankara and the Vivekachudamani about negligence of Brahman. I made a whole chart out of that from those slokas in that scripture, crest jewel of discrimination. So one should never let go of and neglect that Brahman. You can see why in the last chart we had, that was the main premise of Tantra, and also you'll find it here in the Upanishads. So some of these are mentioned in the Upanishads. For instance, the uncaused cause is mentioned. The unmoved mover is mentioned. And the unseen seer and unstruck sound are both mentioned. So those four I put at the top because they're maybe a little less foreign or alien to us when we think about the nameless, formless reality of Brahman, which is beyond Maya, it's beyond words. And I keep wanting to go back to this chart. It's beyond words and beyond thoughts and beyond worlds too. It's this nameless, formless Brahman. Stick another one up there at the top and you have the inactive agent. So all of these are meant to say that if you go back to these charts again, of seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling, that are out of which the 5 elements have come, 5 senses to the 5 elements in the evolutionary form, according to India at least, that when you go back in and you take them back in involutionary form, you're dissolving them back into their origins. And so Brahman can't really be an origin, they say, because it's beyond cause and effect. So when you speak about Brahman, you have to shift your mind beyond teachings, even as profound as Sadakya. That's why Sadakya is listed in this chart we just looked at last week, and a little bit this week, as falling below Ishvara and Sadashiva, and just before Nada, the word. So before they got to explaining the word, Nada, sound. Nada Brahman is another word for Shabda Brahman. Before they got there, they inserted Sadakya right there in a very wise place for it to be. But you're going to go beyond even Ishvara. However, Ishvara is also made of those mother particles. You know, he's her best form. You see, and the Trinity is her 3 greatest, best children. And she gives them, the Upanishads say, that nameless, formless reality of Brahman, who gave the Vedas to the Trinity at the beginning of a cosmic cycle. You see how it's all making more sense to you, even hearing that now, by knowing about Sadakya, right? That nameless, formless reality who was out of which sprang the cosmic Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who gave rise to all the worlds. Let's put it back here. The bhuvanas and lokas and everything, by the words she gave them, the mantras and bijams that she gave them, is the eternal bridge to immortality. So by knowing those things and those methods, those ways which the seers have, with their great minds, extracted from Divine Mother herself, through their pleas, through their prayers, through their penances, through their austerities, and through their gift of boons she's given them, they've come to know these as higher principles, truthful principles, Maha Tattvas. She's like the Maha Tattva of all. And also Mahakasha, Sri Ramakrishna used to call that. Beyond the Chittakasha even is the Mahakasha, this great space of light. So how do you talk about Brahman? The Kaivalya Upanishad, we read those slokas last week. We talk about him, or it, because it goes beyond gender, the uncaused cause. It's the source of everything, but it can't be an origin. So, inactive agent, everything acts here due to the Shakti's behest, but she's taking that out of Paramashiva, all of that, and transferring it into worlds that are manifest, so action can go on. You have to think about it in a tier like that. At the same time, it's the inactive agent, it's also the unmoved mover, so that makes sense. Just by its proximity, it'll cause everything else to move. Without it, movement and non-movement, or action, inaction, don't make any sense whatsoever. There has to be that ground of existence, Meister Eckhart called it, the ground of existence behind everything. The Almighty Father beyond the sun, or behind the sun. The Purusha before the Prakriti. The Atman before the Anatman. And Brahman before Shakti. There has to be that ground of existence. So these are epithets, great declarations, that we want to meditate on because, like a splash of ice water in the face, they wake us up to the fact that even our finest learning has nothing on Brahman. What to speak of its Shakti. And so you simultaneously develop a deep devotion and faith in Shakti, and then ask her, at some point, dissolve me like a salt doll in an ocean. May my mind become like a hailstone falling in an ocean, is how Shankara put that. That superlative ocean of Brahman, with its nectar-like swell of the Atman, into which my mind fell like a hailstone and dissolved. Beautiful. words by Shankara in the Viveka discrimination, Chu Domini, the difference between the real and the unreal, Viveka, the crest jewel that you put on. When you have that way of thinking completely in your possession. Other good epithets are there. I mean, I could comment on all of them. Probably the closest thing we'd want to follow up on, since we just studied Sadakya, is the unstruck sound. Sri Ramakrishna had so many great teachings in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, a must-read book today, about the unstruck sound. Tom, he said, T-O-M. The M has lots of M's after it. Tom. So it's like striking a bell, he said. So that's just really his way of saying Srishti Rahasya, secret of creation, is everything. The word gets struck. The Divine Mother breathes on the waters, or the Father, the Almighty Spirit, breathes upon the waters. It's the same in the Bible as it is in the Rig Veda. They both use those terminologies. So these waters are this word in potential, and that breath on it is that striking of the bell, which then gives rise to Srishti, Sthiti, and Laya. The creation of a thing, which we call projection, the sustenance of a thing, and the dissolution of a thing, starting all over again because everything returns to the bell. And all the sound that came out of it disappears, you can't hear it anymore, so it's back in potential as another strike of the bell. So they have different teachings about the unstruck sound. Sri Ramakrishna was very keen on that. In fact, he said, when I first heard Om, found my way to it, this of course would infer something very deep, that he was on this inner journey to find this highest principle, like you would find a vision of God in Ishvara with your mantra. He was on the way to find the source of all things, which is the Word. In the beginning was the Word. And therefore, he said, when I saw it, then I saw all the worlds were coming out of it. Bhuvana, right? You know what worlds are now, and where they came from and what they give rise to. The deities presiding over it, the words that are part of them, the matrikas. So when I saw that, he said, then I saw the worlds coming off it and going back into it. But no time was passing, was the interesting remark he made. So time had ceased to exist. If you look at the cosmic principles here, kala as time and kalas, phases of time, are below the word and sadakya. They come after the fact. So this is why he saw them. He saw it at its source, and he saw that everything was just coming out of it and going back in it. And no time was passing because kala and kalas weren't in existence anymore. They were back in potential in the word. So he actually experienced this as an inner vision of the word. When I first saw the word, this is how he explained it. Later on, we were asking him how to find it. He said, well, imagine yourself at a beach with many sand dunes, and you hear a distant sound, so you know something's out there. That's your meditation he's talking about. Good God blog. So you just all of a sudden think, there's a sound out there, I have to follow it. Later on, Holy Mother got that teaching. She said, the sound that's happening at the right side when you hear it is the true form of that. The one that's happening at the left ear, the left side inside, is don't follow that one, follow the right one. So that's an interesting thing you might apply if you one day in your meditation hear this humming sound, and it seems like 1,000 bumblebees in your head, as they say, going on. Those who are mystical, they hear the sound. Those who are visionary, they see the light. So these are, two of the highest aspects. This is why you want to meditate on sight and sound, eyes and ears, right? They're much later tattvas when they come down to ear with ether and eye with fire, right? That's those connections at the physical tattvas, seeing with fire and hearing with ether. So you're going to want to meditate upon those things at that level, because those will connect you further, so you will understand it better when the when the psychical and spiritual sides of those tattvas become revealed to you. It's hard for me to get this out, but that's at a much deeper level of your experience. So in meditation, then follow each sand dune, and the sound gets louder and louder. You break over the final sand dune, and there's the beach and the ocean. Kids are playing, sailboats are out there, kites are flying. People are just in joy at the beach under the sun. And so all of this, of course, metaphorically means to find your way to the Word via that kind of visualization meditation. But back to the philosophical side of it, it's unstruck. So the Tantras would say, and we've pulled that out of the Tantras and used it on another chart, nobody strikes Om. Nobody strikes that. It strikes itself spontaneously and simultaneously all the time. So this is an eternal principle, like Brahman. In the beginning was the Word was with God. So it's like Brahman, it's Word. Those are eternal principles. Talk about Shuddha, Ashuddha, and Shuddha, Shuddha, the most pure of all. That's where the mind would go when it wants to experience Shuddha Vidya, right? It's there on the list of tattvas in Shaivism. Shuddha Vidya, the purest of all knowledge, is there. And it's actually beyond Shuddha Vidya. So unstruck sound, when you unwrap that, is very profound. You can take each one of these and do that unwrapping. It's the creator, and I borrow Vivekananda's word there. He said all of this is create. The Atman is create. So it means in Gaudapada language the word would be non-originated, or unoriginated if you prefer, or ajati in Sanskrit. So basically it's unborn and undying. It's eternal. It doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. However you want to put that in English, that's where you would go with to come up with a simple three-word Mahavakya. It's the creator. It's behind all of creation, but itself isn't doing the creating. That's happening by a whole series of other things. Shakti, Ishvara, Indra, we read, right? Indra is involved in it, god of gods. Then you come on down and out, like in the football game. You come on down and you see outward that then it begins to turn into prana. Looks like the creator, life force. Pretty soon it looks like nature is that. See, and if you're believing this, then you're falling deeper and deeper into Maya. If you're keeping your witness consciousness and watching it happen from distance, then you know that I am not that. And that's Kaivalya. I'm a candidate for stripping name and form off of Brahman and transcending time and space and being free of how many nidanas had karma associated with them? You see? So this is how you keep abreast of it all and develop witness consciousness so that you could see this happening in cycles like Buddha did. The Kala Chakra, the river of time. Get out of the river of time, sit on the banks. So beautiful how this is all Advaitic. It's the fewest words we could possibly use. I'm putting it side by side with the Sadakya, which is almost as most words as you can possibly use, or at least infer. And this just simplifies it all, and makes it very pure and very simple. What else do we have there? The unborn procreator. I made that one up, actually. So everything is born because of it, but it's not involved in that birth at all. Krishna makes that clear in the Gita. Things get born out of what? 2 wombs. The 5 elements connected to the body and mind is the external womb called manifested prakriti, and prana is the other womb. That force which gives rise to everything. You see, those are the 2 wombs. I'm not involved. They go on this regimen of prakriti under the helplessness of prakriti all the time, never knowing me as the grandsire, as the Word. You see, they never know me as the great Om. So, those are the wombs of all beings. So then we can say, oh, we have it on good saying by Sri Krishna that Brahmins acreate, see, and it's unborn. But everything happens because of it. Like vegetables dancing in a pot. See, I think maybe it's dancing by their own. No, they're insentient. The water is making them dance. No, the heat in the water. You're getting closer. You're getting warmer. It's like a cosmic game of tag. Game of granny, they call it in India. Find the granny. So pretty soon you'll find out that the gas is causing the water to get hot by the burner and boiling the water. The water's making the vegetables jump about. So you see this whole series of cause and effects, and you take it back to the source, and then, all right, well, I worked at the gas company. See, I know all the tattvas now. I know how they work, how they came out of each other, how they're connected. And I know essentially that I am not those. I am not those. Because if I thought I was those at the beginning, I had a chain around my neck called the nidanas. And I was born with it. That's too bad. Now we get 3 lifetimes to get out of it. I dare you. You see, talk about games, right? So you get a boon from Indra or something, or from Lord Brahma. And he says, okay, well, you want out? I give you 3 lifetimes to do it. Go. So you run for a teacher, you run for a path, you run for higher truth, you find the Sadakya, and you snap the chains of the nidanas and you're free. And you never get bound again because you never were bound. Then some non-dual things start making great sense to you. Wow. I get chicken skin from that, you see. My hairs stand on end, as we say in Hawaii. The Unattached Lover is a good one because it runs more toward the heart of Bhakti path than necessarily Advaita Vedanta. Beings love each other, wives, husbands, children love each other in a certain way. But of course we know there's a conventional side to that. There's a side of Mike delusion in it. And there's a side of suffering, sentimentalism, pain at death, and so forth, when parents, grandparents die, when children die young, and all the suffering that people take on when they get themselves mixed up with that level of attached lover. There's songs about it in India. I can think of 3 or 4 right now. I could sing them for you, but basically is, I suffered so much when my lips tasted that poison of delusion that came from the cup of sentimental love. It caused me pain, suffering. So they're trying to give you some advanced warning about that. And probably the best advanced warning, if you can comprehend it, is the unattached lover. That they love you simply because they see God in you. That's very rare. You'll only find that usually in a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna. More of them there. The formless refuge. Usually refuge is something that you think about in a mountain. And maybe next level of refuge is your own heart, the cave of your heart. You hear about that. But pretty soon you find out that there's nothing that surpasses the formless refuge. That's where everything dissolved, even the 7 chakras. And the lower 6 all folded back in to the 7th. You want to put it that way. Then there's the unknowable knower. Ordinary mind cannot know Brahman, but the schooled mind, the spiritual mind, can come pretty close to knowing that Brahman. That's where Krishna changes his tune in later chapters of the Gita. I am in them and they're in me, those ones that love me. Before that, he's not letting anyone able to know him. No one. They're not in me, I am not in them. So, ooh, that hurts, you see. Boy, I can see not being in him, but I can see my not being in him, but he's not in me. I'm fecked, as the Irish say, if that's the case, you see. But basically, I better find him in me, or create a space for him to come into me, and then I'll have a chance at snapping the chains and reaching peace, bliss, and love, the unattached lover's love. Then there's the impersonal presence. A lot about the personal presence. You could even say Ishwar is that ultimate personal presence. But the impersonal presence, that's you, shining in your own light. There's nothing higher and more beautiful than that. You'll appreciate the personal presence so much more if you know yourself to be the impersonal presence. And that's Advaita Vedanta. Love it or not, take it or leave it. That's what the great souls like Gaudapada tell us. So some of these I kind of pulled out of my own thinking. I don't know if they're mentioned in that exact way, but they're inferred in the scriptures. And then I added on another panel down here when I thought about it more. It's also the uninvolved participant. So it's there in everyone, doing everything through all relationships. And we were talking about that today even, On one side there's this, you better isolate yourself from humanity because they're ignorant and they'll bring you pain. On the other side, there's this saying, to get closer to God, get closer to people. How do I blend those? Or how, is it a matter of just sometimes using discrimination between what's the right thing to do or not? And is that enough? But this uninvolved participant leaves you an avenue open, non-dually speaking. That with people who hurt you or revile you, Christ says in the Beatitudes, you have to know that it's not intentional on their part. That they know that they shouldn't be doing these things in a part of them. And that every person has the Atman within them. And you have to identify with their Atman, not their ego. I just thought of another one here that could have to do with passion. It's the impassionate passion or something. The one who is beyond all passions but forbears them all for the sake of relations. That's the uninvolved participant. There's on the left side the inanimate animator. Similar to that vegetables dancing in the pot, there's something hidden that's making things move. That could be prana, but above prana there's that non-dual Brahman. It's the transcendent pervader. That's one of its great secrets, is that Brahman is all-pervasive. That's why it doesn't need to come and go, and it knows everything in an eternal moment. Because other beings and gods and everyone are coming and going, and they're trying to find it, or they're trying to keep it or possess it, or they're thinking, oh, it's not there, but it's here. I have to discriminate it away there because it's only here. They find out that it's everywhere. As we were just singing with Jafar's help here, it permeates everything. So pervasion is a wonderful word in English that we have that is very much like the original Sanskrit, is that all-pervading presence is Brahman. And it also helps the practitioner to meditate on it. Then it's not something I have to go looking for. You finally convince yourself of that. It's always been there, like hidden, as the Upanishad says. Also our slokas here in the Kaivalya Upanishad, hidden in the cave of the heart. So basically I want to meditate on it as being here and now. It's timeless, so I won't find it later. That's a post-mortem emancipation. Not interested in that. I want it here and now. And so if you know the bhuvanas and the space and the lokas and the chakras and the words, and you know that Mother is pervading all that with her power of matrikas, then you have a much greater chance of realizing the all-pervasive nature of Brahman. That's one of her secret teachings to give to certain select souls. Two more. The Immutable Transformer. Things change, but it's immutable. It's changeless. It's like the 6 proofs of Purusha, right? In Samkhya and Vedanta, in Samkhya and Yoga. 6 Purusa Purusha are there. One of those has to do with the stationary Brahman and things only appear to change on a backdrop that moves. But if you have a movable backdrop, then you can be stationary. Then you see that those trains going by are moving, but you're not. But if you're on a train and with 2 moving trains on either side of you and they're each going a different direction, you have the illusion of moving. You ever had that in a car? You're driving along the freeway, you've been driving for 6 hours, you're a little bit tired, you have to pull over soon, and pretty soon it feels like the whole freeway with all these cars going by, that the people up in front of me are going backward faster than I am. Ever had that feeling? You press on the gas and they go by faster. It's like everything's in reverse. We're all driving backwards. And when you pass a person, they're passing you backwards faster than you're going. See, that's what that's like with but being in a stationary place. You'll only be able to know something's moving if you're in a stationary place. If you're moving with it, if you're in the river, as Buddha said, then things are going around with you in a cycle, and sometimes you won't even see them and know about them. But if you got out in the banks to watch the river, I see it's all. There's the mutable, here's the immutable. And I can only see that with the aid of things like the all-pervasive Brahman. And I can now take that to mean everything that changes in nature is an illusion. Brahman doesn't change. So all the appearances of things help me separate the wheat from the chaff, and I can be stationary. See, Ara Eva Ratanabhau Samhatra Natra Yadyaha Sa Ishon Chosterate Bahuda Jayamanaha Om Ityevam Jayasa Atmanam Svastivaha Paraya Tamasaha Parastat. May you move with protection across the ocean of change and arrive at the furthest shore beyond all darkness, Tamasaha. So that's where you arrive at that stationary principle. And everything else along the way was just a dream movement. Everything seemed to be changing. But when you arrive to that stationary point, then you see that it was all immutable. It was all pervaded by Brahman. It was all due to the power of the unstruck sound that was there. It was all the formless refuge that you never left and that you always are present in. And it's all the creator that's going on. It's all the unknowable knower. It's all the unstruck sound. And all these epithets all of a sudden make great sense to you in the truth of knowing something as powerful as that. And it's also the impersonal presence then. So then finally you have the indivisible multiplier. You have to think of as many of these kinds of dichotomies as you can to try and explain the inexplicable. That's kind of the exercise in this chart. Sri Ramakrishna says, at times the snake sits still, at other times it wriggles across the ground, but it is all the same snake. Again, the snake contains poison within it, but it does not die because of that. So he gave these wonderful snake teachings and bird teachings and rice teachings, and we're beginning to explore them all on the God blogs on Saturdays, if you want to join us on the ashram of the subtle realms, we're calling it ASR, when you join the website and tune in with us for these great philosophical discussions, which are much simpler than something like Sadakya, because they're based on these stories of an avatar, which they tell. Because the avatar will teach the highest souls. It will come down and teach the intellectuals. It will come further down and teach the fallen and the lowly souls too, suffering souls. That's why the avatar sometimes gets a bad rap, as we say, and that isn't seen as what it truly is, because it's willing to put itself at the level, like the deification of Tantra, right? It's willing to put itself at the level of all those beings and see the same Brahman. Seers and sages don't do that quite often. They only teach a certain cross-section. So that soul is truly great, and sometimes hard to recognize. That's one of the reasons why. Now, this is kind of the Shankara's teaching of the snake and the rope. This is kind of Sri Ramakrishna's version of it in a different philosophical way. But that's some more things about the snake that helps us understand the indivisible multiplier and other epithets of Brahman. I hope you've enjoyed this tour through these dozen or so non-dual epithets. Some of them, like these top ones, you'll find actually listed in the scripture. Other these are just the philosophical contemplations of yours truly, and how to take those words and try to explain the inexplicable with them. Over here on the right, you'll see another Tower of Truth, we call it, in accordance with the Upanishad, Kaivalya Upanishad, which we're looking into these first 9, 10, now 11 or 12 different slokas that we're making our way through. And Gaudapada, we just mentioned him, so it's good to hear from him in this class. Brahman is unborn. Back to one of these epithets, right? Free of sleep, devoid of dreams, beyond names and forms, and flashing up all at once. It is omniscient, like intense concentration without end, but transcendent of conceptualization. One of the best sentences I've ever heard to describe Brahman. It is silent, calm, illumined once and for all, unmoving, free from fear. So then get busy, all of you, and out of that statement, give me a few more of these Triputi Tattvas here, because there are a few there that aren't listed here. So when I read that, and I took this picture of this Gopuram here in India, in South India, I shot this from a distance, with all the many tiers of gods and goddesses. You can't quite see them all, but there are just so many of those bhuvanas here, and those gods and deities, and they're all right there on the external, on the outside of the temple, built in. If you got up close to it, you'd be amazed. They're really something. And up the side here, you can see Indra somewhere, and you can see the Trinity somewhere, and you can see the god of fire and death, and you can see the different gods and goddesses all built into the exterior of these great Gopurams, and people walking inside of them to worship. It's wow. It's just talk about a conceptualization. So I created a bunch of terms for Brahman that were true from the scriptures and shaped them into a temple of words. So it was kind of another way in which Matrika and Varnas and Padaka and Padas can work. The physical representation of words on written pages is also an aspect of Varna, Pada, and Matrika, and mantra. Those words are very important to see and to hear both. So if we just go down, it's Satyam. It is truth. It's Akala, timeless. We talked about Kala. I warned you that you had to go beyond Sadakya and Ishvara to get to Brahman. And that would be Akala, not just Kala. Ananta, it's infinite. Advaita, it's non-dual. It's not two. It's akarta. Without looking at the chart, maybe you can do your Sanskrit studies. Karta, karma has to do with action. So basically you could assume then, or presume that it's actionless. Because you put an A in front of some of these Sanskrit words, then you see their opposite. Ati Sukshma was one of my favorite words, that Brahman is subtle. Anaranian is another one. I don't know if it's here. Anaranian means the subtlemost of the subtle. So if you put Ati Sukshma first, and then Anaranian after that, you'd go from the subtle to the most subtle. And we like that, you see. People who are into both philosophy and devotion to the deities, like the Sadakya. You see, it has both the deities and the worlds and the words and everything in it. But then it suggests this non-dual Brahman that it's heading towards. So, therefore, you'd have that Advaitic Brahman as non-dual behind it. It's arupa, formless. It's rupa. Brahman can take forms, can assume them. Avichina, it's indivisible. You're getting a Sanskrit lesson here along with what Brahman is. It's akshara, imperishable. I say that word once a day when I bow before Sri Ramakrishna's picture. Akhanda Satchidananda. He liked that very much. And in the Gita, Akshara Brahman, the imperishable Brahman, has no death because it was never born. Atindriya, omniscient. The Indriyas are, of course, not omniscient. Neither is the god Indra, except in his own realms. He's omniscient in his own realms. A beautiful story about Indra's jeweled net in the Upanishads. That was it Markandeya, the rishi, one of my favorite rishis. He came upon Indra's jeweled net, and Indra was sitting there looking at this jeweled net, and there were worlds in every one of them. Talk about your 221 worlds, on that chart we looked at. Basically, he can see into each world that's under his control. All the gods, the asuras, the ancestors, the celestials, the humans, all the beings in those worlds that he presides over, they're all surrounded by a jeweled net that nobody can get through, see, unless he decrees that they can do so. So a beautiful story about Indra's jeweled net and how he's just looking at different facets, like the net's made of little plates of crystal, you see. Dozens and dozens, hundreds of them. And each one of those is a world he can peer into to see what's happening there. So he's omniscient, this is my point, just inside of that level of worlds that he presides over. But Brahman is omniscient over all, atindriya. So Indriya, atindriya. Aparinami, Brahman is immutable, one of the pillars of non-duality, aparinama, along with ajati, vada, which Gaudapada just told us about up here. So Brahman is immutable. It means aparinama, that it does not go through changes or transformations. So anytime you see something change or transform, that's not Brahman, sorry, goodbye, I'm out of here. See, I'm looking for Brahman only. So, what does it remind you of, in case you've forgotten what we're studying today? Kaivalya Upanishad. I'm out of here. I'm only looking for Brahman. That person's looking for Kaivalya, separation from things of name and form. And he may have to use Sadakya to do it, or other forms. So I put together that chart for you of, what is it now, 8 or 9 different darshanas we've grown into, and how they deal with the dissolution of name and form. We just said up here it's a rupa. We'll probably come to more like that. So, anirdeshya, Brahman is indescribable. So I should probably shut up right now, or a nicer word is hush, and walk away and just let you think about all this. It's indescribable, but probably India, the best of all religions and countries, that said, we agree, and we actually invented the term, but we're going to talk about it anyway, because some of you need to hear. Anirdeshya, ajata, there it is, unborn and uncreate. So along with the parinama, you have this ajata. Isn't it fun? You have a Sanskrit lesson, you have the English equivalents in a few words, all on a beautiful temple that you can look at, all to understand the backdrop of it all, the nameless, formless, timeless, spaceless Brahman. And Matrikas, anyone? See? Subtle particles, anyone? Want to treat your mind to some philosophical dessert? See, and gorge yourself even for 3 hours? Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Well, all is Brahman. It's the best way to say it. It's actually a Mahavakya. It's not one of the 4 main Mahavakyas, but I would say if they had to choose a 5th one, that would probably be it. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. It's mentioned in the Upanishads that way. So all is Brahman. Jivan Mukti. Brahman is the living, liberated soul. As Krishna says, they are dear to me and I am dear to them. When they get that level of understanding, which is Ishvara and even beyond, because he himself talks about, I am that Brahman. So when it comes to transcending names and forms, as we're talking about here in this pillar of truth, tower of truth, then we would go to something like Bodhisattva for the Buddhists, or Jivan Mukta, the Jivan Mukta in India. There's also Videha Muktas, which also beyond bodies. They get beyond bodies. The Jivan Muktas will keep the bodies for a while to use to help others, like the Bodhisattvas. But the Videha Muktas say are one and done. One and done, they say. Shanti Sharana. Brahman is the peaceful refuge of all. We had that in the last chart. You know, what is reference? The unborn, or the impersonal refuge. Vibhu. Brahman is all-pervasive and all-inclusive. It's a beautiful short word for Brahman. Ahamta mamata. Brahman is egoless and genderless. So, although it's a little bit habitual, we've talked about he, Brahman, he, but we've also talked about Shakti, she, but when you get to the real non-dual Brahman, that transcends gender too. And that was beautiful about the Sadakya chart, that when they were describing Kala at the highest level, they didn't mention either Shiva or Shakti there, as if it was this guide, which is genderless, which is just built into the equation, which is hidden, as this Upanishad we're studying just told us, and which has to be searched for. How do you search for it? How about the Svetashvatara Upanishad's way of searching for it? That's another family of great souls. You search for it like oil in sesame seeds, like gold in rivers. What did you say?
Different chant.
Yeah. You search for it like patina in copper. Have you ever put a penny near the shower? Come back in a few weeks. Where'd that green stuff come from? So you have to search for Brahman, because it's hidden inside of everything. Then you'll know for sure that Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. It's Para Brahman. I mean, we're almost getting to wordlessness. We don't have anything more to say. These are the best things we could say, these two charts. I'm glad I got to put them side by side and show you that Brahman can be spoken of with matrika in mind. You could say so we're taking this up with higher understanding of Kala and Bhuvanas, matrikas, varnas, padas, and mantras. These 6 Sadakya ways. It's like you got initiated into that just an hour ago. Now we're looking at this. Didn't I start up the class saying that? We're going to create an atmosphere here, and then we're going to take up the truth. So that's how serious they are about Shuddha, purity, and higher purity. And be careful of the mixed things. You want to keep them out of the picture for a while. We'll have to go back for them later anyway, when we go back to the tattvas. But right now, leave me in cyclical tattvas or in spiritual tattvas. That's where I've gone in my mind now. Leave me there. I'll come down when I'm ready. So Parabrahma means Brahman is transcendent yet all-pervasive. So we have to go beyond all-pervasive and make sure that we know that all dualities, or all things, tattvas, are soluble into Brahman when it's realized fully. You can't have it both ways. Sri Ramakrishna said, the further you go towards Brahman, the further away you go from bhuvanas, from the worlds, particularly from this world. There are people who think they can take this with them. If they take it with them, they're born again. If they let go of it, they don't have to be born again. That's just a simple rationale of it all. So if I think I can have my cake and eat it too, you don't know that neither the cake nor eating it is the best thing to do. Because the cake has sugar in it. It's not good for you. So you want to go beyond not only male and female and lower and higher and worlds and so forth, to this Parabrahma. I could sing it. Parabrahma, Parashakti, Jagadrupa. I forget what the next words are. Parabrahma, Parashakti, Jagadrupa, Rama Krishna. How could I forget him? So, because I'm talking about Brahman, that's why. So, Brahma Hridaya is the final one of this Tower of Truth. Brahman exists in the heart as intelligence. It's also called Meta Kendra. So, there are a couple of beautiful words in Sanskrit that we have to call forth and remember, because there are different ways of thinking in all religions. India, no different. That there will be sampradayas and lineages that concentrate on certain teachings more than others, like form against formlessness and so forth. And when that happens, then it would be nice to have a few words like Brahma Hridaya or Meta Kendra. That it's not just intelligence, and it's not just love. How about put the two together like the two wings of the bird, and we'll be fine then together. We'll be able to get along. So Taittiriya Upanishad says, and we will end here, that one Brahman, as Atman, decided, may I be many. So with cosmic mind it projected all this, whatever there is here. Having brought it all forward, verily it entered into it all. And having entered into it, it abide blissfully. It became the defined while remaining the undefined. It founded everything but remained foundationless. It became both consciousness and unconsciousness, the real and the unreal, and whatever else there is. Yea, it became the entire reality. On account of it, the seers declare that all is real, all is Brahman. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. Om, peace, peace, peace. What is external is finite, also infinite. What is internal is infinite. From the internal, the external has sprung. Yet being infinite, both being infinite, nothing but infinite actually remains. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om. Japa Hari Om Tat Sat.